This is Radio Health Journal. I'm Nancy Benson. This week, why one expert says there's sure to be a vegan diet in your future.
You can be a vegan and still have a very unhealthy lifestyle if you really want to. I mean, vodka is vegan, potato chips are vegan.
How we're likely to eat in the future when Radio Health Journal returns.
I'm Reed Pence, the producer and host of Radio Health Journal. If you like listening to Radio Health Journal, you'll also like our sister show, Viewpoints, which covers a wide array of topics from education to history to the environment. Here's a preview of what they're covering this week on Viewpoints.
There are many times that I resolved to stop. There are many times that I said I would change or even get help, but then reversed myself.
The all-consuming grasp of addiction. Then,
a lot of the United States is very auto-oriented, so this is an area that our nation really needs to focus on if we want to get people out of those cars and into healthy, active forms of mobility.
Exploring different modes of mobility. I'm Marty Peterson.
And I'm Gary Price. These stories in depth this week on your public affairs magazine, Viewpoints.
Listen to Radio Health Journal and Viewpoints on your favorite radio station. And subscribe and listen anytime on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify. Also, follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Radio Health Journal.
Healthy diets took a beating over the holidays. That's what New Year's resolutions are for, to make up for all the merrymaking. But now we've got Super Bowl Sunday and all of its festive food, just in time to torpedo your 6-week-old resolution to lose weight. After that, are you surprised when people say they're going vegan to try to lose some weight for good?
Sometimes people seem to shift over to a vegan diet because they think it's a diet and it will always help them to lose weight. And I don't think that's necessarily true, because you can be a vegan and still have a very unhealthy lifestyle if you really want to. I mean, vodka is vegan, potato chips are vegan. So you can really choose unwisely, I would say, and still be vegan.
That's futures anthropologist Dr. Roanne van Voorst, president of the Dutch Futures Society and author of the new book, Once Upon a Time We Ate Animals, The Future of Food. She believes that sooner or later we'll all be vegans, or at least we won't be killing animals for food. Relying on animals for so much of our food supply is far more inefficient than a plant-based diet. And someday, she says, the planet won't be able to support it.
I'm not an activist, and before I wrote this book, I wasn't vegan either. I was just really curious to future scenarios. That's my profession. I'm both an anthropologist and a futurist. And I had done a lot of research on the future of climate changes, the future of natural hazards, the future of conflict. And all of these topics kept leading me back to the impact of the food industry.
According to the World Resources Institute, animal-based diets account for more than 75% of global agricultural land use and emit about 2/3 of agriculture's greenhouse gases. Yet animal-based foods contribute only a little more than 1/3 of the protein people eat worldwide. Van Voorst says most people probably have some sense of that.
Nevertheless, I, as well as most people around me, find it really hard to change our eating behavior and our consuming behavior. So that really fascinated me, and I started to realize the problem there with behavioral change is not that we have insufficient information. The problem is that we can't imagine a new way of living. And it's hard, really, to imagine a new color, right? It's really hard to think outside of the box in which you've always been trained and raised and educated. And for me, that was, I think, perhaps the most important barrier to change is a lack of hope and also a lack of understanding how it could work. And so I decided I'm going to write a book, not in a normative way, but in an explorative way. Show me how it's done.
So, in her book, Van Voorst constructed a world of the future where vegan diets are the norm and answered hundreds of questions that popped in her head.
What would the farmers go and do? What would we eat? How would it impact our friendships and our relationships? I was interested in all those things. And then I started realizing life is really full of those unimaginable transformations. Like, look at smoking, right? I mean, when I grew up, it was so normal for adults to smoke on children's birthday parties. And now, if people would do that, everybody would say, like, oh, that's really antisocial. That's not very healthy. And I could suddenly imagine, like, oh, there might be a time where in parts of the world where it's easy to get plant-based alternatives, where we look at people continuing to eat a lot of meat and say, that's really not so social.
Van Voorst avoided talking much about the health advantages that color most vegan books because she says most people already know about those too if they just admit it. But she says most people can't imagine eating seaweed, which some farmers are growing in place of animals. And she says most people can't imagine what breakfast might look like.
On the kitchen table, well, it's going to be a different experience. There's also lab meat. That's another discussion, whether you like it or not, but all over the world, there are now tests being done with meat grown in laboratoria and Petri scales rather than having to kill an animal for it. And it's actually meat, right? So it comes from the blood and from the tissue of one cow, and then they can expand that and grow it.
But it's not just what we eat that would change in a totally vegan future. Food is a major part of our social gatherings and self-definition, so those would change too.
You have the phenomenon of vegan sexuals. I'm not sure if you've heard about them, but they already exist, and they're a growing group of people who have their own separate dating platforms, for example, because they say, I only want to date people who have my values and who also happen to like the same dishes as I like, right? So there's so much going on, and this is already there. It's just a matter of increasing and growing, and I see that happening very clearly.
Almost everything Van Voorst envisions has already been invented, so she says it's only a matter of time. With scientists predicting increasing effects of global warming, changes on the farm are inevitable. So we need to get used to the idea of a change on our plates as well, even at our Super Bowl party. Dr. Roanne Van Voorst's book, Once Upon a Time We Ate Animals, is available now. You can find out more about it and about all our guests on our website, radiohealthjournal.org. You'll find an archive of our segments there, as well as at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Our production manager is Jason Dickey. I'm Nancy Benson. Coming up next week on Radio Health Journal.
There's a lot of evidence that early gross motor behavior can actually be indicative of longer-term developmental and cognitive outcomes.
How the pandemic affects brain development of new infants.
Then do you get the winter blues?
I just thought this was normal. And then when I moved to the sun, I realized, oh my gosh, this is what you're supposed to feel like.
All that and more on Radio Health Journal.
And that's Radio Health Journal for this week. Follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to learn more. And check Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify for a library of past programs. Plus, you'll always find previous segments and information about our guests at radiohealthjournal.org. Join us again next week for another edition of Radio Health Journal.